I love that. Hello. This is the first time that I have ever done something super cool and recorded a podcast and a YouTube interview at the same time. This is, welcome to, I would like to introduce Carrie Kearns. And Carrie is, I'm going to get this right, a companion animal bereavement counsellor, which is such a brilliant job. Carrie, whilst I fiddle with the screen so I can get a side to side, can you please tell me what exactly do you do?
Okay, yeah. So I help to counsel people pre and post pet loss. So I help people that are either facing the loss of a companion animal, or I help people that have made the decision to say goodbye to a pet, or pet's died naturally, and I help them with their grief and bereavement and help them to navigate the grief and reassure them that they're not going mad, what they're feeling is completely natural, and basically just help people to untangle it all and offer a different perspective, because sometimes it's hard to see a way forwards. So I try and help people to see that it will get easier, it will get better, but you may need some support to get there.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, this is certainly my experience, and I know it's the experience of a lot of other people. It's interesting as well that you said companion animal, that's your job title, companion animal bereavement counsellor, because
Yeah.
I remember being told it's just a pet. And it wasn't, not talking about the dog, this was like the, mouse, it's just a pet, get over it.
Yeah.
And that's really unhealthy. and it's not that easy, is it? So I imagine that you end up having these conversations with people. Does this happen when people say everybody tells them to get over it, but I just can't? That kind of.
Yeah,
That's
why I do what I do, because you have this almost toxic mindset that it's just a pet, so they're not worthy of, or the grief isn't valid. And that's what I think a lot of my clients struggle with, is that they're like, well, if it isn't real and it isn't valid, why do I feel so bad? And then they try to make themselves feel better when all they really need is reassurance and support and
that's the
acceptance.
cheer up, stiff up a lip.
It's like, oh, get over it, you can just get another one. And you're like, that's not healthy, that's not helping.
It's not that easy, is it? And it was interesting, and we were just having a talk when just before we came on, and somebody had said to me, oh, so what are you doing today? And I said, well, I'm doing an interview with a companion animal bereavement counsellor. And they said, why? You're a parenting support. And I did that. Yeah, we both laughed about it. And I was like, well, because lots of family have pets. These pets become very close. I mean, I remember when John and I just got together, as my husband, and he must have been like 24, 25, and his dog, like his childhood dog, passed away. So like we'd moved out, we had our own house by then, and we were living long way away from home, and visiting occasionally. And then he got the phone call from his parents to say that his dog had passed away, and he was crushed, because this is how important our pets, and they become, people call them the fur babies. They are really important. And so what happens is, obviously, inevitably, we know that animals aren't going to live as long as us. We know this when we get them. And so few people prepare, don't they, for the eventuality. And then the children are very, very sad, obviously. And then here's where it relates to parenting and gentle parenting and conscious parenting, is that it's only usually in the moment where people, they come downstairs and an animal has passed away, or they find out from the vet that they're going to have to make a decision of probably, euthanasia and putting them to sleep. And the parents are like, I don't know what to deal with. I don't know how to deal with this emotions. And I remember we talked before about the parents, if we are feeling the emotions as the parents, and the children are feeling the emotions, so we are called on as the adult in this situation to be both the support and process our own feelings. And yet so few of us were helped with that when we were younger. So it is a cycle. That's why I work so much with cycle breaking, and I say it all the time. It's breaking that cycle of, oh, it's just a pet, it's all right, get another one, get another goldfish, it's just a goldfish, it's not a big thing, as if you're allowed to grieve over a horse but not a dog, or a dog but not a fish. It's strange, isn't it? So I'm going to shush now, I've talked a lot. I want to ask you, as the specialist, if if families are going through this, or they might be listening to this podcast or watching this interview and thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me right now. What if, what if next week, and I really hope it doesn't, but what if next week, the vet check isn't a simple vet check? Or what if you wake up and the hamster, has passed away in the night and the children are bereft? What can parents do to help their children and themselves?
So I say, it's difficult because we, obviously, as the parent, you're going to be upset because your pet's died, and it's a shock. But then you instantly go into that protective parent mode where you're thinking, I have to protect the children from this. I have to shield them from this. And like years ago, it would be that, say, somebody lost a hamster, and then the parents would rush out to the pet shop and buy one that looked just like that one. And then the children think, oh, these hamsters, they don't live like 2 years, they live at least 5, because they've never been shown that the pets do die. They've been they're shielded and protected, and
with the because parents love them. It's exactly. That feeling, my child is going to be upset, I must stop it, and actually it's not a case of us stopping it, because that's not the most healthy thing, is it?
No, exactly. I mean, it's I understand the want and the need to protect your child from something upsetting. And the other day, actually, one of our rats, he got spooked. He had an upper respiratory infection, so I bought a nebulizer to help him breathe better. And the noise of the machine scared him and scared one of the others, and he was being chased around the cage. And then he got stuck between the cage and one of his little huts that he sleeps in, and he just fell over and started to fit. And even though
you have small children as well, don't you?
Yeah, so my little girl was coming around the corner going, "What's wrong, Mummy?" And I was like, "Just keep away, just stay over there." And everything just went out the window. I was like, she cannot see this happening.
And you're somebody who is trained, but that desire to protect the children is so big.
Everything, my training just went out the window. I was like, she cannot see this. And luckily he recovered and he's fine now. But everything in that moment, I just panicked, and I think that's what it is. It's like that panic, and
that's why I think it's important to be prepared before it happens.
Yeah. So I mean, we've lost pets in the past, and I think something that I always say to people is that you have to be age appropriately honest, because for many children, their first experience of death will be the loss of a pet. Yeah. And how we help the children to cope with that can help them to develop healthy coping mechanisms for other losses, because there will be other losses in their lives, unfortunately, and how we help them to cope will, help them in the long run. And I think
I wonder if as well, if it goes the other way, where if they've experienced that, like the death of a family member, and then maybe even say 2 years later, their hamster dies, it can pull up all these feelings that maybe weren't dealt with at the time. It's like a mirror, isn't it? Because it's the same situation, but on maybe a safer, a different version of it, isn't it? So it might even go both ways. So it prepares them, and it also helps them to process if it has happened, if they've lost a grandparent or an auntie or somebody. And in the last 2 years, that has happened more than we ever expected, hasn't it? So grief is important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, age appropriate honesty is the key, really. Because, as I said, we want to shield our children as much as possible from the harsh realities of life. However, we can also, without meaning to cause or potentially cause further issues by not helping them, not showing them the harsh realities in a way. So obviously death is a part of life. We know this. And I want people to start being less afraid of the D words, dead, death, died, and starting to say them out loud, because it isn't the words so much that we find difficult to say, it's the response to hearing those words and understanding what those words
mean.
So
people use euphemisms, don't they? Like, oh, he's gone upstairs, or he's gone to sleep. And the children don't understand, because they're like, oh, well, he'll wake up, yay. But then you have to break the news again, and it's worse.
It is. It's like I did a talk at my son's primary school once, and I was talking about pet bereavement, and this little boy said, "Oh, my dog went to live on a farm," and I was like, "Oh, did it? Oh, that's nice." And I thought, "Oh gosh." And I thought, well, it could be. He might have actually gone to live on a farm, but I have a feeling that that isn't what happened. And obviously, it wasn't my place there and then to tell them otherwise, because I didn't know the full story. But we do tend to use euphemisms a lot, like put to sleep, and they've gone on holiday, they've gone to live on a farm, they've gone to stay with the vet, and in all of those scenarios, the pet can come home or can wake up.
Yeah, and
And
it's
that
because
can,
we, like you said, it's
yeah,
because we're afraid of the finality of their
yes,
body has stopped working. This is something that
yes,
I was trained with as a teacher and working with
yeah,
young offenders, so vulnerable young people. Is we were told you have to be clear. My sister's a nurse and my best friend's a GP and things, and we were always told it hurts, but you have to be clear.
yes,
Otherwise, and because people so easily, they want to be in denial, like, no, they're fine. And if there is
yeah,
any possible wiggle room, like a loophole of, oh no, if they're at the farm, they can come back, then people will
yeah,
latch onto that. And that's not healthy because they don't then process their grief. So
yeah.
what would you say that parents who, maybe listen to this and they're like, okay, so don't say they've gone to a farm, don't say they've gone to sleep. What do we say?
Yeah. Okay. So it's important that you, like I said, that you're honest and that you explain that they've died, or if the decision had to be made for euthanasia, explain what euthanasia is. And I don't mean you don't have to go into, the deep um, explanation of how it works and what it means. It's explaining to your child that euthanasia is when the vet helps our pets to die a peaceful death because they're very ill or they're very hurt, and it isn't fair to keep them alive anymore because they're hurting or they're very ill. And it's horrible to have to say to a child, your pet is currently alive, but shortly it's going to die. And because obviously we don't want them to die, and the children are like, no, don't do that, why do you have to do that? And
Yeah.
but when we explain that
That's true. They may
it
not understand that until after it's happened.
exactly,
May well
yeah,
be quite
exactly.
cross with you.
Oh yeah,
And then in
definitely.
2 days' time, or even a year's time, I know, but unfortunately as a parent, we're like, oh, I have to have this, but we do. I guess that's the thing, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's all about being brave and saying, okay, we have to go through this. Like we
yeah,
chose to have animals, we chose to love them, we chose all
yes,
the joy and companionship.
mm-hmm.
This comes with it
Yeah,
too, and we have to be brave. This
yeah,
is also a bit where I talk a lot about, the self-care of adults. Like, you can't do this. Well, you can do it, but it will hurt, because like we said, it hurts being the
mm-hmm.
bad guy. It hurts being the person who says, I'm going to take your dog and it is going to die today. Like,
Yeah,
oh, I can't even imagine it. And so
yeah,
many of us, because so many families have pets, so we don't want it to happen in the first place because we love our animals like our little
yeah,
babies, don't we? And we
yes,
don't want to upset our children, and we really don't like being seen as the causer of hurt by our children.
yeah,
This is where the self-care comes in. Like, this is where you are going to have to at some point go to your friend's house for a cup of tea and have a cry,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
okay. Like, it's
yeah,
okay. Like, maybe not do. I mean, when we left our cats, when we came to Vietnam, we couldn't bring our cats with us, and actually it was an option. That's a 16-hour flight in a cage, and they'd have to be sedated, and we couldn't see them. We had quarantine. We lived in an apartment in a city of 14 million people, so it wasn't an option. And we
yeah,
felt, and we talked about it with our children, who then were 4, 3, and 2. So we
yeah,
still talked about it with them, and we found a friend who took our cats, who our children know, who actually used to be a vet nurse, so it was
yeah,
perfect. And we still all cried.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, it's horrible because, like, as parents, we're trying to deal with our feelings and our loss as well,
And so you have to
and we,
budget yourself an outlet,
yeah,
because
yeah,
whatever
and
you need to do, in addition to supporting
exactly,
your children.
yeah,
Yeah.
and what we have to be careful of is that we either it's a fine balancing act between not appearing as if it hasn't affected you at all,
The be strong.
and be strong and stiff upper lip and all that, and don't cry, and then you're and then there's the other side where you're very outward, expressing your emotion, and then the children are potentially
Like,
scared by the intensity of your emotions. And so it's a fine balancing act between showing your children like health, the way that people cope with the loss. And so we're trying not to scare them, and we're also trying not to show them that actually, you need to bottle these feelings up, that they have to be shoved down. And it's hard because, like I say, you're grieving too, but you're also a parent, so you're torn between. I find a lot of parents will say, I um, don't cry in front of my children. I don't want them to see me break down, see me upset. I want
in the
them to
cycle
see.
breaking, we have that, but and also it's because of how we
Yeah,
were raised in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the noughties. It's still happening now. We were
yeah,
raised with, what we started with, oh, it's just a pet, don't worry. But that
yeah,
also goes to like, oh, so you didn't get the part you wanted in the play, it's just a play, or whatever it
yeah.
was.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and not because our parents didn't love us, but because
No.
they didn't know how to process emotions. So then when they
Yeah.
had children coming home from school and they'd lost their football and they were distraught, then the parents taught us, and not to to bottle our feelings up or just to disregard it, like, your feelings aren't valid, it's just a small
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
this scenario where a pet is ill or has already passed away, it's an opportunity to break a cycle. So in some ways it's even bigger than what we think it is. It's not just that my pet died, what do I do?
Yeah.
It's more than that. It's, oh, I have this huge emotional opportunity. And if as a parent you're realizing, I was never allowed to grieve my dog when I was 10,
Yeah.
oh, it's going to come out. It is all going to
Yeah.
come out, because it's got to come out at some point, because we can hold this on. I mean, do you have this, Carrie? Do you have people who hold on to it for years and years and years?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And then you get the unresolved grief where another loss occurs, and then it brings back the unresolved grief from other losses, and it just snowballs, really. And then people will say to me, I thought I was doing okay, and then they start talking, and then they tell you about other losses that they've had, and you realise that they never really dealt with those other losses, and then now they've got another one, and it just builds up. And so what I try and do is help people to work through them all, really, and process. I give people a chance to say out loud the things that people have told them to keep inside. And it's like I said, one of my biggest sort of pet peeves is when people say, oh, it's just a whatever species it is. It could be a stick insect, it could be a horse. It doesn't matter what
we
species
had
it
stick
is.
insects and the children were bereft. We buried
Yeah,
it in the garden. We did a little
yeah,
honouring ceremony. And I remember
yeah.
thinking at the time, I had stick insects as a kid and I can't remember what happened to them. Again, I guess that's just an
No,
example where I'm just
yeah,
remembering. I
yeah,
think mine just disappeared
exactly.
and my mum just thought, oh, well, that's that then. They'll never think about it again. I've
Yeah,
had sticks. I thought about it
yeah,
last year.
yeah. I think sometimes we
Yeah,
think if
oh,
our children aren't actively asking, then they're dealing
yes.
with it, they're doing okay. So we just leave them to it. It's like, oh, well, we're all right then. And it's, yeah, it's important to, and you find maybe that you're thinking, well, I was never, like you say, I was never allowed to grieve over my dog, my childhood dog or cat, and then you think to yourself, well, now's my chance to stop this now and break the cycle and say, I never had that opportunity, and look how I feel today as an adult. I'm not going to let my children experience what I experienced. It
Yes.
stops
If
today.
I lean into this fear and I cocoon them in a bubble, they will feel
Yeah,
like I do
yeah,
in 20 years time, 30
yeah,
years time.
yeah,
So I have to be
and
brave right now, but also this is a chance. So Carrie, this is meant, because I always say in my parenting practice, I would say healing plus skills equals the parent that you always wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so it's an opportunity to, yes, heal, to ring someone like Carrie and say, okay, can we have a few sessions because this has happened? So to deal with all your stuff, and you are allowed.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last week when we first spoke, that people don't realize that they're allowed to grieve a pet, and people don't realize that they are allowed. I mean, allowed by whom? By yourself, by anybody, that they are allowed to grieve for their childhood pet when they're 42.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And actually, I'm interested because we just said that it was very, you know, when people come and sometimes they're holding on to all these different losses, and it's their childhood, you know, it's their child's cat that has got them off on this thing. So maybe they've dealt with the child and they've listened to what I talk about in my practice is allow your child to speak, allow them, you know, hold them whilst they cry and say, you know, not saying necessarily like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, but allow them to say, yes, you feel sad. I'm here for you. And actually quite a lot of the time that's all they need. And there's not much more that you can do apart from maybe mark it, like we buried our stick insects in the garden, and maybe they might want to write a poem or draw a picture, so you could lead them towards that. But also, if the parent is realizing, oh, there's a whole load of other stuff, it can suddenly snowball for the child. So the child's gone to bed and you've done a great job parenting wise, but when you feel wrung out yourself, how do people get through that, Carrie? Because, you know, if they get to that point, you're like the dark night of the soul, like, oh, it's all cascading, and then they work with you. How do they feel? I guess what I'm saying is, how do they feel at the end? Because I always just really want people to know that if they do feel, you know, the kid has gone to bed and they've done a great job, brilliant parenting, tick, but I feel inside out right now. I feel torn up, and I'm remembering my childhood animal, and also all the other things that I wasn't allowed to grieve the loss of, you know, moving house or whatever it was, because it grief of one thing becomes grief of another thing, and it all snowballs, doesn't it? So how do people feel after they have worked with you and worked through the grief?
I think for a lot of people, it's like a weight's been lifted, I suppose. That they've finally been they've had their feelings validated, and like you said, there isn't. I always say to people, there's nothing I can say that'll make this okay, because the only thing that'll make everything okay is to do the impossible and bring them back, and I can. And I struggled for many years with the fact that I couldn't take the pain away from people. This is the kind of person I am. I don't like seeing people hurt and in pain. I want to make it all better. But I realised that obviously through my training and what have you, that isn't what's needed. You need to experience the pain and work through it, because grief isn't something that you get over. It's something that you go through and come out the other side of. And I think that, what I try to do is validate people's feelings and be the sounding board for people. I would say, like, I'm like an emotional sponge. You know, you vent and let it all out, and I will just listen and take it on board. And it stays with me. If you want, just let it out. And I think, like say, at night,
the release, somebody's finally heard all of my stuff, and it is. Do you know what it is? I've just realised some of it is going to be inner child healing.
Yeah.
What I do in the parenting, it's healing that 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 5-year-old who was never allowed to grieve, and you're finally in this specific way helping them heal their inner child. That's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'll be talking to clients, and they'll be talking about obviously a recent loss, and then as we're talking, we discuss other losses that they've encountered in their lives, and then it's like a light bulb moment, and then the tone changes, and they realise that actually this isn't just the recent loss that they're working through. This is every loss they've ever experienced and haven't had the opportunity to openly express how they were feeling. And I think a lot of the time it's mainly because we've encountered, when I was a child, I never had pets growing up, but my grandparents had dogs. And I remember Bruce, my granddad's first dog, Black Labrador. And this is really weird because I'm nearly 40 now, but he was I was about 2, I think, when Bruce was alive. And I remember him, I can vaguely remember this big black thing like licking my hand, and and I can just like a very distant locked in memory. And I remember that I don't know, I was about 4 or 5 maybe when he passed, and I remember how he'd developed cancer, I think, in his stomach. And I always remember, I don't know, it stuck with me for all the wrong reasons, I think, which again is why I do what I do. My mum, bless her, and no hate towards my mum or anything like that. I totally understand where she was coming from. She tried to explain to me what had happened, because I was like, where's Bruce? Why is he not here? And she said, oh, he was very ill, and there were like these little things in his stomach that were like eating him, and he was very sore. And I was just like, what? And she was like, you can, I can honestly, if I regressed, like, I can almost like
I can see your eyes.
Wrong like, thing to say, but I didn't know what else. She didn't know what else to say. So
she was trying to help you through it by explaining. Yeah. This is the way parenting, isn't it? We go through and we say, thank you very much, Mum, because I know that you tried your best, and I know that your heart was in the right place. But that was not age-appropriate honesty, and I need to be able to work through that now. Yeah.
I think she was trying to explain it in a way where I would be okay with him dying, because his life, it's like, well, this is the very worst case scenario, so therefore his death isn't the worst thing that was happening right now.
That's that he isn't in pain anymore.
He isn't in pain anymore. So I was like, oh, okay then. And as a child, you just sort of bounce back and get on with whatever you're doing. But it stuck with me for years.
You're allowed to process the emotions. They do surprisingly bounce back, don't they? It's like,
they do. And recently, we've got 4 rats now. We had 2 couple of years ago that obviously both passed. The last one, Christopher, he started to develop this like hind limb paralysis, and he was getting on a bit, and he broke his leg because he couldn't move his legs properly, and they got caught in the bars, and I knew that he wasn't going to come home because he was elderly in rat terms, and obviously had a bad break and he couldn't move, and so I knew that he wasn't going to come home from the vets that afternoon. And I went in with my daughter, who was 4 at the time, and the vet came in and she said, look, he's not doing well. She said, we could fix the break, but chances are, he's just going to deteriorate with this hind limb paralysis. And she looked at me and she was like, I said, I know what you're going to say. And I said, I do want to proceed with euthanasia. And my little girl's like looking at me, like smiling, no idea what we're talking about. And I was like smiling at the vet, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to tell her in a minute. And we left him with the vet, and so as we're coming away, she's like looking at my hand. She's like, "Where's Rat gone?" And so we're in the middle of like pets at home, and I'm like, "I'll tell you in a minute." I said, "You staying with the vet?" And then we got outside, and I just like crouched down to her level, and I said that he was very ill. I said he'd hurt his leg very badly. He was in a lot of pain. I said, and the vet is going to give him a little injection, which is going to help him to die, because he's in a lot of pain and it's not fair to keep him alive anymore. And she just burst into tears. She was absolutely hysterical, as you can imagine.
Yeah, of course. And I don't because that is the appropriate response. I think that's the thing that that people need to know. Like, that is the appropriate response, and it is the knee jerk is like, no, don't cry. I've made you cry.
Don't do it. Don't cry. And I just let her cry. I was like, I was crying. I was like letting her cry it out, and I'm like welling up, and I'm like, and I thought, well, I didn't push my feelings down as such, but I was like, no, this is her moment. Let her let it out, because I find that if someone else is crying, you tend to stop and console them. So I was like, no, I want her to just let it out, do what she needs to do. And then we got back to the car, and then she found some stickers, and she was happily playing with the stickers like nothing had happened. And my husband looked at me, he's like, you all right? I'm like, no, but I will be, I said.
Yes, but do you know what? I'm just going to pause there. Yeah. Are you all right? No, but I will be.
Yeah.
That's I think that is the big takeaway, isn't it? Like and thank you so much for sharing that story, because that I was listening to that, because we don't have any pets right now, because we've just moved here and we don't know how long we're going to be here, so we probably won't last in Vietnam. But I am storing that. I'm storing that away, and that's why it's so important to have a podcast, because I think, and the video, because I think people might listen to this, be like, oh, we don't have any pets right now, and maybe in 2 years' time it happens and they go, oh, what do I do? Carrie. And so it's about knowing, or they might have a friend, which is also likely as well, isn't it? So we have friends who have hamsters here, and we might be able to refer them to this podcast and to you. So thank you so much. It is really important what you do. It needs to be recognized more, doesn't it? It's so powerful. And just that model. So I'm taking away the age appropriate honesty. Use the words, not the farm. And you could always, later you can imagine, what is it like, if you want to go into life after death and things, what do you think happens? And you can use this as an opportunity, a door to have the philosophical conversations in an age appropriate way. So you might want to draw pictures of what it's like for them, and then you can slot it into your family belief system, and you can talk about that. So it's an opportunity for a spiritual discussion if you choose to. But in the moment, they have died. Sorry, they have died, because that actually causes less harm. In the short term, like you said, your daughter burst into tears, so in the short term it's going to be awful, and I'm sorry it's going to be awful. A loved one has died. And almost like embracing this is going to be awful. Have your self-care. This is my point from me, like, have your self-care as mom, just like Carrie, like you said, you were there for your daughter, and you had a few tears. That was her moment, and you supported her, and you showed her your emotions, and not the it's okay. And what we do when we're trying not to show our emotions, thinking I don't want to upset my kid, but enough that you're sharing with them, but like you said, not trying your hardest not to fall apart in front of them, and then have them entertained in some other way, or with somebody else. And then you go do your cry later, go to your mom or whatever, or ring your sister and have a sob, and allow yourself to let that out. And then if it comes up and you realize that this is a whole load of other grief that I'm feeling through the lens of this particular animal who has left my life, this is where you seek support, because you deserve it. Because like Carrie said, you might not be okay right now, and it might be throwing up all these griefs, and it might be like people grief or job grief, and then we had to move house, or whatever grief, all through this lens. When you talk it through, you will be okay afterwards. Like, there is another side, isn't it? It's that thing, there is another side. So Carrie, where can people get hold of you? Because I should say before, we've got the show notes for the podcast, and we also have show notes that go with the YouTube video, so you won't need to run and write this down, don't worry. But Carrie, please, I know we'll have it in text, but where can people find you?
Okay, so I have a Facebook business page, Carrie Kearns, Pet Bereavement. If you I think if you tap into the search bar, like the I can't remember what it's called, the little app thing.
Oh
I can't remember what it's called. CK Pet Loss, I think it is. That should bring up my page. Or if you just type in Carrie Kearns Pet Bereavement, it should pop up. I also have a website, www.animalbereavementcounselling.com. I know it's a bit of a mouthful. I'm better at,
but it says exactly what it is.
Creating websites. Yeah, exactly. And this is why I put like animal bereavement counselling or companion animal bereavement counselling, because it's trying to sort of steer away from the whole, it's like the pet, it's just a pet, it's a companion, it's more than that. And also the animal bereavement, because it could be, obviously I help people that leave domestic animals, but also like zookeepers and anyone that deals with non-domestic.
Gosh, no, imagine they get so close to the... and they are carers, aren't they, for the animals? Especially if they're like a higher primate. Wow, that's a whole new level I hadn't thought of.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Oh, Carrie, what a job you do.
It's but yeah, so I don't counsel children like directly, only because I think children's minds, because they're always developing, it's an area that I personally don't feel professionally qualified to do.
Yeah,
because
there will be, I don't know if we call them pediatric grief specialists who specialize in that, wouldn't there? And I would say if you are in that situation, Google, and you know what, I will have a look for someone. I'll do a blog post on it as well. So maybe, Carrie, me and you were going to do a joint blog post, aren't we? So we'll put that up too, and we'll find some people that we can recommend. But also, if you go into your school, so if you're, I mean, mine don't go to school, but if you do go to a school, they will have people who they can put you in touch with, so a counsellor. And if it's it might not be an animal bereavement specific one, but certainly within schools there is so much. And I used to be a class teacher. There is so much more support in schools than people realise. So sometimes they don't ask for it because they don't realise that, you know, if your teacher puts a referral in and you have pastoral support, that actually your children can get that extra support that they need and deserve. And yes, if you're an adult, you deserve it too. And it is incredibly healing and powerful. Carrie, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we'll probably have you on again soon, and likely in the next few years I'll probably ring you if it happens to me. Thank you very much. Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you.